Rayman is one of the most iconic mascots in modern gaming. With a 30-year history spanning across a wide variety of game titles, it was the name that put Ubisoft on the global game development map and made them hundreds of millions of dollars. But today, Rayman has practically vanished and the series hasn't had a new mainline title in over 13 years. So what happened to Rayman? Is there anything new on the horizon? And how did one of Ubisoft's most successful early franchises fall to the wayside? The story of Rayman, of course, begins with the story of Ubisoft. But as always, you aren't here for that, you're here for Rayman, so let's make it quick. It's 1984, and 5 of the most French brothers of all time, Christian, Claude, Gerard, Michel, and Yves Guillemot, created a mail-order gaming company called Guillemot Informatique and made a decent amount of money. But they quickly learned something. The real money would come if they could make the games themselves. Ubisoft came next in 1986, with development offices centered in a castle in the French countryside to attract young and eager developers. Next comes Michel Ancel in 1987, a teenager who worked behind the scenes on animations and light programming on smaller titles like The Intruder and Pick and Pile. In 1992, he developed a prototype for a limbless hero platformer based on a character that he'd imagined as a teenager, then formally pitched Rayman to Ubisoft management. The concept was greenlit that year, with Ancel installed as lead designer on what would become the first Rayman game. It started as a scrappy prototype and quickly turned into one of the most technically demanding 2D platformers of its time, constantly yanked from one piece of hardware to another while Ancel fought to keep his playable cartoon vision intact. The first Rayman concept started on Super Nintendo as a 2-player fairy tale inspired game, before getting a full cartoon makeover with huge expressive sprites and dense colorful worlds, forcing the tiny team to build custom tools and an engine. Then, they decided it should launch on the Atari Jaguar before eventually deciding to include the upcoming PlayStation console as well. Rayman had quickly become a multi-platform showcase with large worlds, cutscenes, and full CD audio across PlayStation, Jaguar, Saturn, and PC. The team behind it grew to over 100 members, and fans have estimated that the budget ballooned to upwards of $4 to $5 million USD when adjusted for inflation. So, how did it fare for Ubisoft? Rayman launched in late 1995 as a bright, demanding 2D platformer where you guide a limbless hero through hand-drawn fantasy worlds, freeing caged electoons and gradually earning new abilities. It had a ton of charm with the hand-painted art style, was extremely satisfying to play due to the tight controls and surprising difficulty, and its premise was unique, helping it to stand out just as the industry was shifting towards 3D. It had traditional platforming elements, but its focus on challenging runs where you needed precise timing and quick reactions, combined with the visual marvel of hand-painted cartoon-like worlds and unusually smooth animation for the time, made Rayman feel far more memorable than most of its peers. And frankly, fans and critics loved it. EGM rated it as their game of the month in September of 1995, and Allgame gave it glowing reviews across the board. It sold upwards of 4 million copies, making a significant return on investment for Ubisoft and practically putting them on the map. Again, before this, Ubisoft was relatively unknown in the global gaming landscape as their biggest projects had only sold a few thousand copies. So the success of Rayman was a big deal for them. It even enabled Ubisoft to go public in 1996 to fund larger future projects. It was time to turn Rayman into a true franchise. Before I get into that, I need to take a second to tell you about the company that made today's video possible, Freecash. Freecash is a way to make a little bit of extra income from your phone by doing things like playing mobile games and completing surveys. To be honest, I was a bit skeptical when they reached out to sponsor this video, but after trying the app, I actually liked it enough to take them as a sponsor, and I did earn over $50 throughout my first week that I've been using it. Basically, Freecash shows you special offers, mostly for mobile games, and as you make progress in the games or complete tasks, you earn real money rewards. I started playing a Disney solitaire game and earned cash as I progressed. Cash that I could get through PayPal, gift card, bank transfers, and more. It's a cool feeling to earn rewards, and I'm gonna continue to check back in and see how my earnings have changed as I play a game that I already enjoy playing. Freecash is a great way to pass the time and make a little extra money while doing it, and the app even has a 4.8 star Trustpilot score. So download Freecash for free today by using my link in the description to get a $5 sign-up bonus. Your earnings go up the longer you use it, so might as well start today to unlock some offers. Thanks again to Freecash for sponsoring this video, and now let's continue talking about Rayman. But before they moved on to the next sequel, they made a decision that really helped to cement Rayman as a platforming powerhouse. Ubisoft released Rayman Designer on PC in 1997 as a way for fans to make their own levels, extending the life of the game and allowing them to play it pretty much indefinitely. This opened up a huge modding scene and added a lot of content for players. Then, this tool was combined with the best of the community levels and sold under the Rayman Forever package in 1999 to build a bit of additional hype before the game's first real sequel launch to the public. Throughout this entire window from 1995 to 1999, Ubisoft had actually been working on a 2D sequel to Rayman. But after seeing a demo of Naughty Dog's Crash Bandicoot at E3 1996, they determined that Rayman 2 had to be 3D. So the entire project was scrapped to follow this new approach. When it released in 1999, it looked far different than what fans were used to, but, well, everyone still adored it. This time, the Glade of Dreams, the world that Rayman takes place in, had been taken over by robotic pirates, and the only one who could stop them was Rayman. Compared to the first game, Rayman 2 took what appeared to be a much darker direction. Combined with the 3D experience, it made the game feel much more mature and, dare I say, professional. The levels were mostly linear, but included collectibles strewn about with optional paths hiding away caged allies that you could rescue, or lums that you could collect to restore the Glade of Dreams to its former glory. You unlocked more in-game lore for every 50 lums that you collected, and every 10 cages that you broke increased your max HP. Rayman had an expanded moveset, he could pick up objects, and there were gimmick levels that included things like water skiing or riding bombs with legs. Together, these mechanics made for some pretty diverse gameplay. Paired with the buttery smooth animations and tight controls, it was a joy to play and look at. This, of course, made Rayman 2 a massive success as well. Brandon Justice of IGN loved it, saying, "Rayman 2: The Great Escape is, without question, the most impressive feat of game design and execution the platforming genre has ever seen. Forget Mario, forget Banjo, and don't even think about Crash. This is the next evolution in gaming." GameSpot, GameFan, and Game Informer all gave near-perfect scores too for similar reasons. Rayman 2 sold well, and while there are no official sales numbers for the sequel, it undoubtedly sold millions of copies as well. And this was just the start of what Ubisoft would be doing with this budding franchise. It was time for the first Rayman spin-off. Rayman Arena launched in 2001, and it was a competitive multiplayer game where you raced and fought your friends across a variety of stages. It included quite a few characters from the game world, including Rayman, Glowbox, Teensies, Razorbeard, and more, and there were skins for each of these characters too, something that would end up becoming a staple mechanic for the series. But otherwise, Rayman Arena wasn't remarkable in any real form, and it kind of flew under the radar. Ubisoft also tried to produce an animated Rayman series around this time, but it was quickly scrapped after 4 episodes. Even with the disappointing performance of both of these little side projects, Rayman was by far Ubisoft's flagship franchise, at least for the moment. But Michel Ancel was getting tired of Rayman and wanted to work on something different, something more mature and story-driven. So he did not lead the development for the third Rayman sequel, and instead focused on a game called Beyond Good and Evil, which is a whole nother mess that we're about to get into in a minute. This, of course, led to a different direction for Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc, which released in 2003 on GameCube, PS2, Xbox, and PC, to slightly lower reception than its predecessors. This time, the focus was more close combat heavy without the projectiles and range found in the previous titles. There were new power-ups that were timed and needed to progress, things felt a bit more linear, and there were far less secrets and collectibles to discover across stages. And most notably of all, Rayman and the other characters in the game now had voice actors, which in my opinion just felt a bit off. Overall, people still enjoyed Rayman 3, but it definitely felt like something was missing, especially when compared to Rayman 1 and 2. It was obvious that a creative shift was coming, and with Michel Ancel's dwindling involvement, it would be sooner rather than later. And with 2 massive new flagship franchises on the horizon for Ubisoft, Rayman would no longer be their sole focus. There was supposed to be a 4th Rayman game developed by Phoenix Studio in 2005, the first mainline title to not be developed by Ubisoft since the original team was busy with Percy Jackson's King Kong, and Michel Ancel still wanted something different. But ultimately, this game was cancelled by Ubisoft once the release of the Wii approached because they saw potential for party games on the new console and thought that Rayman 4 would be a waste of resources. This resulted in a bunch of employees from Phoenix Studio getting laid off overnight. but some of their work was saved and used towards the next project that was in the Rayman franchise, but that wasn't a true Rayman game. It was called Raving Rabbids, and like the original release back in 1995, it would take the world by storm. Ironically, Rayman 4 was supposed to be called Rayman 4 Raving Rabbids, introducing the world to the characters that would end up becoming a cultural icon in gaming. It was aiming to be almost like Rayman Breath of the Wild, with an open world, action elements, open-ended combat, and so much more. This game would have been groundbreaking for the time, and I personally would have loved to experience it, but when Phoenix Studio was shut down, Ubisoft pretty much gave all of this stuff up in exchange for a quick cash grab party game on the Wii, using the Rabbids that were supposed to be enemies in Rayman 4. They got Michel Ancel back involved, brought it back to the Ubisoft umbrella, and Rayman Raving Rabbids was released in 2006 on the Nintendo Wii instead of a true Rayman successor. This game was pretty much just a quick little 3 to 4 hour party game where you played a series of minigames as Rayman alongside these new characters called Rabbids, where you did things like throwing cows, shutting bathroom stalls, or dancing. Oh, and let's not forget the nightmare fuel that traumatized me for years as a kid, where you had to clean the rabbit's teeth. This mission should have required a rated M label, because I've never been so unsettled in my life. Raving Rabbids used the Wii's trendy new motion controls and was a fun, simple experience for the high price of $50, capitalizing loosely on the Rayman brand. The reviews were decent, it was a cool little project, and it sold a reasonable amount of copies. So you'd think it would be left there, but oh no friends, this is just the beginning. Ubisoft knew that the relatively small but cult-like following that the Rabbids characters gained had a lot of potential, so they doubled down and released Rayman Raving Rabbids 2 in 2007, pushing mainline Rayman games to the side again in favor of something quick, easy, and mass market. It was more of the same really, and it sold well with below average reviews. Weirdly, the game didn't even have a proper ending, you just beat the last minigame and the credits rolled, a sign that this was probably rushed out pretty quickly to try to appeal to the Wii's motion control scheme yet again. It sold decently well for young kids who didn't need a polished AAA experience, and showed Ubisoft that there was money in these quick, fun party games. It worked so well that they doubled down for a third time, or I guess tripled down, to release Raving Rabbids TV Party in 2008. This time, you didn't even play as Rayman, but that didn't matter because between these 3 Rabbids titles, Ubisoft had managed to sell over 6.5 million copies of games that were far less expensive than many of their other flagship franchises. It made commercial sense to shift their focus to these Rabbids games and milk them to oblivion, which is exactly what they would do by spinning off the Rabbids into its own series after this title, forgetting about Rayman altogether. But that's a story for another video, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see it. Now, if you've watched any of these videos of mine, you'd probably assume the rest of the story was predictable. Ubisoft had a cash cow that slowly fizzled out and was forgotten about, they switched to a new franchise, and Rayman fell to the wayside as they began making a lot of money from other more popular franchises like Far Cry and Assassin's Creed. But believe it or not, that actually isn't the case this time around. In fact, throughout this entire time, Ubisoft had been working on the best Rayman game to date, quietly in the background, which makes it a little more surprising when you find out what eventually happened to the series at the end of this video. Anyways, the next mainline Rayman title, Rayman Origins, was first announced on June 14th, 2010. It was originally going to be released episodically and be a prequel, but both of these aspects changed during development. It was also announced that the game was being developed with the UbiArt framework, which was an in-house game engine created by Ubisoft. It was pretty much a full reboot of the series, being led once again by Michel Ancel. It was a game that was supposed to go back to the series' roots, and when it launched on November 15th, 2011, it was nearly perfect. It was a visually stunning 2.5D platformer with a superb soundtrack. The levels were loaded with places to explore, goodies to snag, and prisoners to free, just like the original. Combat was smooth and fluid, the weird voiced aspects of the game were thrown out, and you could play with up to 3 friends. It was exactly what Rayman needed to come back to its former glory, but, well, for some reason, it didn't sell very well. Ubisoft confirmed it was profitable, but was pretty tight-lipped about anything further. Allegedly, the game sold around 1 million copies, which was good, but Ubisoft had a new cash cow on their hands with Assassin's Creed, and it set a higher standard for success than what they had once expected as a small, budding French studio. For comparison, the first game in that series sold 8 million copies. But they saw the potential of what Ancel had accomplished with Rayman Origins and decided to give it one last shot. And little did anyone know, but this game would be the last mainline game in the Rayman franchise to date. It was called Rayman Legends, and it was aimed at being a Wii U exclusive. Ew, gross. As we all know, the Wii U was a massive flop, and the November 30th, 2012 release date for Rayman Legends would be pushed back by nearly a year to enable a launch on other consoles as well. It finally came out on September 3rd, 2013, and surprisingly, it was received even higher than Origins. People really loved this game. It was yet another beautifully illustrated title with over 120 levels, a bunch of costumes and characters, a wide variety of gameplay mechanics and level styles, and so much more. Ubisoft had managed to make a perfect game and make it even better, and Legends was truly the best Rayman game ever made. Rayman was back, or at least he should have been. Tragically, however, this game also didn't sell very well. Likely due to an obscure little game called Grand Theft Auto V launching a couple of weeks later, but that's just a guess. Legends did eventually prove a small financial success, selling around 1 million units by November 13th of 2013, but behind closed doors it wasn't enough. Ubisoft quietly canceled a sequel to Legends, leading the biggest current drought in the history of the series. For nearly the next 10 years, the only things to come out of Rayman were 3 mobile games similar to the style of Origins and Legends. They were all runner platformers created in the UbiArt engine and were pretty solid for mobile games, all things considered. There was Rayman Jungle Run on September 20th, 2012, Rayman Fiesta Run on November 7th, 2013, Rayman Adventure on July 21st, 2015, and Rayman Mini on September 19th, 2019. Each was pretty similar in that you were always moving and had to platform across bite-sized 2D levels littered with goodies. Jungle Run was a pretty bare-bones starting point, but things got majorly fleshed out with Fiesta Run. Finally, there was Rayman Mini, an Apple Arcade launch title that mostly returned to the direction of the first couple of mobile games, albeit with some elements of adventures. Hopefully, none of this sounded cool, because all 4 of these games are no longer available on the mobile devices that they were designed for. In November of 2019, Ubisoft removed Jungle and Fiesta Run after an iOS update made these games incompatible. Apparently, killing them entirely was easier than updating them. Meanwhile, both Rayman Adventures and Rayman Mini are both lost media. You can at least access Mini with piracy, but Adventures is completely unplayable without the servers that it relied on. So the only games to come out of the franchise in a decade are all basically gone. And I know this comes as a surprise, but that's pretty much the end of the story, as no other Rayman games have been released or announced ever since. But there is a bit more happening behind the scenes at Ubisoft that kind of explains this whole situation, so let's dive into it. Since there was no room for full-release Rayman games on Ubisoft's schedule for over a decade, Michel Ancel spent those years focused on 2 massively ambitious projects, Wild and Beyond Good and Evil 2. Wild, in particular, was wrapped in mystery. Ancel was directing and writing it, and it was being developed by Wild Sheep Studio, a company that he founded outside of his ongoing role at Ubisoft, backed and funded by Sony as a PS4 exclusive. The project began around 2014 and was set in a Neolithic prehistoric world built around a huge open map, procedural systems, and mechanics centered on interacting with and even inhabiting animals in the wild. The early footage and trailers looked strikingly original and promised enormous potential, but behind those trailers, progress was far less concrete. Over the following years, Wild's scope ballooned, systems multiplied, and the vision kept shifting, yet the team never locked down a solid, shippable structure. And by about 2018, the project still hadn't coherently come together, and Sony ultimately pulled the plug on direct funding. Around that point, Ubisoft acquired the rights to continue development, and negotiations reportedly got far enough that when Sony later tried to reclaim the project, with an offer to double the original budget, Ubisoft refused, leaving Wild squarely under its umbrella. The whole arrangement was strange. Ancel was effectively splitting himself between Ubisoft and his own studio, the game was drifting, and tension grew between him and Ubisoft's management over what exactly Wild was supposed to become and how it was being handled. In the end, the game was quietly cancelled sometime around 2020 after years of reworks and dead ends. Ancel would later describe the way it was abandoned as, quote, a real scandal in interviews. But the underlying reality is that Wild had already been undermined for years by the way that he led its development, something that would quickly be revealed as the real scandal got uncovered, but we'll get back to that in a second. At the same time that all of this was going on, Beyond Good and Evil 2 was spiraling into its own, even more extreme form of development hell. Officially in the works in some form since at least 2007, it has now been in development for nearly 20 years, making it the longest single game development timeline in history. And yet, after all of this time, the public has still seen little more than a handful of concept-heavy trailers with almost no gameplay. The whole situation was odd, and it became even stranger when on September 18th, 2020, Ancel made an unexpected announcement that he was, quote, retiring from games to run a wildlife sanctuary. But a week later, it all made sense. In a column published in a French magazine on September 25th, 2020, internal accounts at Ubisoft revealed that Ancel had in fact left while under internal investigation for his behavior and its impact on Beyond Good and Evil 2's development. Ubisoft as a whole was hit by a wave of workplace misconduct investigations, and as the company's culture came under scrutiny, people working on Beyond Good and Evil 2 started speaking up about Ancel as well. Employees described his pattern of perfectionism and micromanagement, harsh behavior towards staff, and a habit of abruptly discarding months of work when he changed his mind about the game's tone, structure, or direction. Teams would push towards one vision only to have it reset, leading to high turnover and a collapse in morale. Ancel's prestige and his close relationship with CEO Yves Guillemot gave him freedoms that others didn't have, most notably the ability to work effectively part-time at Ubisoft while simultaneously running Wild Sheep and Wild. That meant that the director, whose approval was essential for moving Beyond Good and Evil 2 forward, was often physically absent, and when he was present, his feedback could be volatile and destructive. In public, Ancel has dismissed these accusations as fake information revealed by a few people who want to destroy me and the projects, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Two high-profile, endlessly delayed games, both led by the same director, both collapsing under the weight of his unrestrained vision and volatile leadership. Ubisoft's broader dysfunction absolutely enabled the situation, but I don't believe for a second that Ancel is a victim of the system. The fact that he resigned before any of this came to light also isn't a good look either. Beyond's development is still continuing under new leadership, and there's still no end in sight. And now, with its creator gone from Ubisoft, the Rayman franchise is in a weird position as well. Rayman's most recent appearance in a major game was being featured in a DLC for Mario and Rabbids Spark of Hope, his first appearance since Rayman Legends. There's still no definitive versions of most Rayman titles, so they're a bit of a pain to get a hold of outside of Rayman 3 HD and Legends Definitive Edition. Fans are attempting to make their own Rayman 4 using the foundation of the Raving Rabbids prototype, with the original project called Rayman Raving Rabbids Reburrowed. That is hard to say. The trailer looks awesome, but with a project of this scope, who knows if it'll actually ever get finished. For the 2D Rayman fans, there's also a fan-made Rayman Origins 2 in the works, which looks spectacular on the trailer. There's tons of other fan projects in development too, spanning from animations to mods to fan games to fan remakes, which the community came together to showcase with an event called Rayman Alive. Basically a Nintendo Direct for Rayman fan projects. So while the original projects were in limbo, fans managed to keep Rayman alive. The success of these projects has caught Ubisoft's attention though, and it may lead to something mainstream for Rayman on the horizon. At the end of 2024, Ubisoft announced that they were, quote, exploring a new Rayman game with creator Michel Ancel involved as an advisor for the project. Nothing else was heard about this until another update was posted in late 2025 to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Rayman games, with the tease that, quote, Ubisoft is working on the future of Rayman, but that fans, quote, shouldn't expect news from them too soon. Weirdly, the second announcement in 2025 didn't mention anything about Michel Ancel, so there's no telling if he's still involved or if this project will ever actually see the limelight. Personally, I'd be surprised to see another Rayman game up to the quality of Origins or Legends, as the market has shifted a lot since these games came out, and they already didn't perform well back when they were released in 2013. Ubisoft seems to be pursuing larger, mass-market AAA games that are highly monetizable, rather than smaller, more creative projects like Rayman with limited room for growth and consumer spending. The company now openly frames its core strategy around huge open-world or service-driven titles like Assassin's Creed, Avatar, Star Wars, Rainbow Six, and The Division. titles that can sustain multi-year seasons, cosmetic DLC, and subscriptions, and they spotlight these games and earning reports as engines of recurring player investment rather than just boxed sales. Highly acclaimed, smaller, polished games like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown are acknowledged but clearly sit at the margins of this strategy, while Siege-style live ecosystems and massive IP collaborations are treated as the core of Ubisoft's strategy. With this in mind, to me, Rayman's current treatment makes sense. When Ubisoft talks about exploring a new Rayman game or working on the future of Rayman, I feel like they're probably talking about nostalgia-driven remakes, a safer spin-off that can be easily merchandised, or a more systemic, live service-friendly reinterpretation of the franchise, not a pure, tightly focused passion project like Origins or Legends. Fans and small communities have kept Rayman alive enough to earn him a seat back at the table, but the table itself has changed. Ubisoft's incentives now favor games that behave like platforms, and unless Rayman can be bent into that shape, his future is likely to be a bit smaller than longtime fans of the series are hoping for. Now, funny enough, while I was in the middle of this video, I learned about a Rayman 30th Anniversary Edition that's rumored to be coming out sometime this year in 2026. And while this does kind of change the story about the future of Rayman in theory, it also kind of reaffirms what I've already been saying. It's clear that Ubisoft really doesn't have plans for anything truly new in the franchise, and while a new title is exciting news, the fact that it's a remastered version proves my point. I don't see a true Rayman sequel coming out anytime within the next decade, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. What are your thoughts on the future of Rayman? Do you think there's room for a new full-release game that honors Rayman's legacy, or do you think the series should be retired for good? Let me know this along with your history and experience with the franchise in the comments below, and let's talk about it. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like, as all of this content is 100% human-made and will always be, so your support goes a long way. And don't forget to check out Freecash by using my link in the description to get a free $5 bonus upon sign-up. The app is honestly a lot of fun to use, and every download helps to keep these videos possible. That's it for today's video. I will see you guys next time, and peace.